A team of researchers at the Max Planck Institute once showed a series of images to a group of test subjects. The images were simple. Some showed spiders, some showed snakes, some showed flowers, some showed fish. The test subjects were 6 months old. None of them had ever seen a snake in the wild. None of them had ever been bitten. None of them had been warned by a parent, or watched a nature documentary, or learned through any experience whatsoever that snakes were something to be concerned about. And yet, when the snake images appeared, every single one of them showed a measurable stress response, pupils dilating, heart rate shifting, the body doing, automatically and completely without instruction, exactly what it was built to do. Something in a 6-month-old brain already knows what a snake is, and it already doesn't like it. Today, we're going to look at the fears you carry that you didn't choose, the reflexes that fire before your brain has time to think, and why, in almost every case, the thing that's terrifying you hasn't actually been a real threat to anyone alive for tens of thousands of years. Let's start with snakes, because snakes are where this story really begins. Primates have been dealing with snakes for an extraordinarily long time, longer than we've been human, longer than our ancestors were recognizably anything close to what we'd call human. Venomous snakes populated Africa for tens of millions of years before hominids showed up, and they were exceptionally good at being invisible, patient, and deadly in exactly the kind of environments early primates lived in. Biologist Lynn Isbell spent years building what's now called the snake detection hypothesis, the argument that snakes weren't just a hazard early primates dealt with, but a driving force behind some of the most significant changes in primate biology: better color vision, more sophisticated depth perception, faster neural pathways for threat detection, the ability to process visual information about something threatening before you've consciously registered what you're looking at. That last part is worth sitting with for a moment. Your visual system can detect the outline of a snake and begin a fear response before your conscious mind has formed the thought that is a snake. The alarm goes off before the report has been filed. Researchers testing this found that people identify snake shapes from cluttered visual environments faster than almost any other shape, including shapes they were explicitly trained to find. It's not attention, it's something older than attention, and it's not just snakes. The spider story is slightly different, and in some ways more interesting. The fear of spiders isn't quite as universal across primates as snake fear, which has led some researchers to argue it's more recent, evolved specifically in human ancestors rather than across the broader primate family. The argument is that dangerous spider species were common in the African environments where our ancestors spent the bulk of their evolutionary history, and that a black widow or similar spider bite, even if not fatal, could leave someone incapacitated for days or weeks. In a world without medicine, without anyone to bring you food while you recovered, being unable to move for 2 weeks was functionally a death sentence. So the math was simple. The ancestors who noticed spiders faster, who felt a strong enough aversion to keep their distance, survived at higher rates than the ones who didn't. Generation after generation, the detection system got sharper, the aversion got stronger, and now, several 100,000 years later, a completely harmless house spider the size of a coin sends a neurological signal through a system that was built to respond to something a lot more serious. Here's the part that should genuinely stop you. Most of these fears are remarkably resistant to logic. You can know, consciously and completely, that the spider on the wall cannot hurt you. You can know that snakes are statistically responsible for a tiny fraction of annual deaths in any developed country. You can recite the facts to yourself while you stand frozen in the corner of the room, waiting for someone else to deal with it. The knowledge doesn't help because the fear isn't coming from the part of your brain that processes knowledge. Psychologists studying this call it the fear module, a system whose core feature is that it learns fast and forgets slowly. Normal fear conditioning, the kind where you learn to be afraid of something through experience, can be unlearned. It fades. But fear that's tied to evolutionarily relevant threats, the ones that recurred across hundreds of thousands of generations, shows a completely different pattern. It requires almost no reinforcement to form, and it resists extinction even when you actively try to eliminate it. Therapists treating severe arachnophobia report something consistent. Patients can intellectually understand the spider poses no threat, can spend time near spiders in controlled settings, can make real progress. And then, months later, with no new negative experience, the fear is quietly back. The system doesn't want to let go of something it spent so long learning to hold. Which leads to probably the strangest part of all of this. The things that are actually most likely to kill a person in the modern world don't trigger this system at all. Heart disease, car accidents, poor dietary choices accumulated over decades. Your brain has no ancient alarm wired for a car approaching at speed because cars didn't exist. No reflex that fires when you open a bag of chips at midnight because processed food didn't exist. No visceral warning signal for the kind of slow, statistical risks that fill modern life. But a spider? A sudden movement at the edge of your vision? The feeling of being watched in a dark room? These tripwires are live, tested over millions of years, still fully functional. You're running threat detection software written for a world that no longer exists. And by almost every measure, the software works. It fires exactly when it was designed to fire. The problem isn't that it's broken. The problem is that the landscape changed completely, and nobody told the program. So the next time something small and eight-legged appears on your wall and your body reacts in a way that feels completely disproportionate to the actual threat, try to remember what you're actually feeling. Not a flaw, not an irrational weakness. Just a very old system, still doing exactly what it was built to do, in a world that has mostly moved on from the things that built it. The predators are gone. The fear they left behind is not. There's one more piece to this that's worth knowing, because it reframes the whole thing in a way that's hard to shake. These fears don't live in the part of your brain that thinks. They live in the amygdala, a small structure that's been doing essentially the same job for hundreds of millions of years, long before anything resembling a human walked around. It doesn't speak in language. It doesn't respond to arguments. It responds to shapes, to movement patterns, to the specific visual signatures of things that killed your ancestors often enough to matter. Researchers studying the amygdala found that it can process a threatening image and begin generating a fear response in as little as 14 milliseconds. Your conscious awareness of what you're looking at takes significantly longer, which means, in a very real sense, your body is afraid before you are. The decision to be scared has already been made by the time you know what you're scared of. And here's what makes that genuinely strange to think about. Every fear response you've ever had to a spider or a snake or the feeling of something moving at the edge of your vision in the dark, every time your heart rate jumped before your brain caught up, you were, in that fraction of a second, running on the same hardware as something that lived and died millions of years before you were born. The same signal, the same pathway, the same ancient calculation, playing out in a completely different world. The predators that built those pathways are gone. The saber-toothed cats, the giant constrictors, the predatory birds large enough to carry a primate. Gone so long ago that we have only bones and footprints to prove they existed at all. But in 14 milliseconds in the dark, when something moves that shouldn't, they're still here.